Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes' Godbreaker at online booksellers today. I was watching the movie Poetic Justice on Tubi this weekend, and I had to wonder what happened to Black love. Because as I was watching the movie Poetic Justice, which was supposed to be a love story by John Singleton, it came across just as bitter and angry as the movie The Color Purple. Now, the late John Singleton said that he made Poetic Justice after Boys in the Hood to try to appeal to black women. But the picture that he painted in Poetic Justice was not a very flattering one of black women, nor was it a very flattering picture of black on black love. Now, the movie Poetic Justice was supposed to be a film that was supposed to showcase black love in the 90s, but when I really started to take a critical look at it, it really showed me the foundations of what many call today the modern gender war. Because when I look at the way Justice and the character Tupac were trying to get together, it looked like they were dealing with a lot of issues as related to black on black relationships due to years of black women having their brains basically washed by feminism, and many black men having to deal with the lack of having a father in the home to provide them with guidance on how to be a man. So when I looked at the movie Poetic Justice, it really showed me the foreshadowing of what we have on social media today of the modern gender war. You have a lot of black women who, like Justice and her friend who was played by Regina King, who are dealing with a lot of hurt and pain. And then you had the Tupac and Tony Terry characters who really were presenting some sort of example of manhood, but they were not being respected for being the men that they were. So when I looked at this film, I could see where there was a start to be a crack in the world of black men and black women as related to loving each other, because the undertone of the film was filled with a lot of anger, and it was filled with a lot of anger on both the sides of black men and black women. Because when I look at Justice, she was one of these black women who was raised by a feminist mother, and this feminist mother, because she didn't want to take responsibility for her life, took her life, and she's been living in an existence because she didn't get any sort of love from her mother and her grandmother, and because she didn't get any sort of love, this is why she was out here all by herself, trying to just exist with her and her cat, and didn't really want to go out into the world because she did not know how to navigate the world outside of the job that she had as a hairdresser. Then there was the Regina King character, who was one of these other women who had been impacted by feminism, and she was involved in a relationship with the Tony Terry character, who was basically a simp, and she had no real respect for this man. No, she basically saw this man as an ends to a means. She did not really see him as somebody that she wanted to go out here and connect with and share with. Then there was the Tupac character, who was a black male who was trying to be responsible, but he didn't know how to be a man. He was still living with his mother. He had a baby mama who was on drugs, and he had a daughter who was growing up to become just as lost as Justice and the Regina King character. And when I looked at the overall story for Poetic Justice, sadly, it painted a very dark picture of black on black love, and it painted a very dark picture because I could see the foundations of the modern day gender wars, which were where we started to see this divide between black men and black women. And the film basically showed how many of the black women, they were sitting there angry at black men and they wanted black men to be more than what they could be. Now, many of the black women in Poetic Justice were talking bad about black men, talking down about black men, and calling all black men all kinds of trifling, not understanding that a black man could only do but so much, because in white supremacist America, it was very hard for a black man to go out here and make a living, because he could basically wind up losing everything in his life, basically, if one of these white or these non-black men couldn't get the coffee that they wanted from the coffee stand, that man could be fired. So it showed how very little had changed as related to black men even after the civil rights movement, and how many black men were out here struggling, and how things had actually gotten worse for black men because a lot of black men did not have fathers, and because they did not have their fathers actively in their lives, what happened was many of those black men never learned the life skills that they needed to be men. And that's why we saw in the opening scene of Poetic Justice, Justice's first man getting murdered at the drive-in theater, because these guys were still beefing and arguing with each other, and they did not know how to go out here and be the kind of men who could lead a community, because they were too busy fighting amongst themselves. And we also saw it in the movie where the Tupac character was at his baby mama's house, and there was another man in her bedroom where while he was there visiting with his daughter. Basically, again, none of these men knew how to lead, and it was a real serious problem. And again, this is one of the problems I saw with this movie. I mean, both black men and black women not knowing how to love each other, and I believe that they didn't learn how to love each other due to the dysfunctions that came up as related to the generations of this later silent generation and the baby boomers, who basically raised a group of kids who learned not to love each other, but to hate the opposite gender. And they learned how to hate the opposite gender because you had a lot of single mothers who didn't really, they were hurt because the man in their life wound up not meeting their expectations. And because that man did not meet their expectations, what they did was become very bitter. And as they became bitter, they started telling their stories to their daughters. And as they told their stories to their daughters, they had a very negative perception of men. While on the male side, we saw how the men were just not being taught to be leaders. They had no sense of direction, and they were basically existing and not really knowing where to go. That was what I saw on that side. And again, it really showed how one generation of mothers and fathers who are dysfunctional can breed more dysfunction, and that dysfunction can lead to both the black men and the black women of the next generation not knowing how to come together to share love with each other. That's what I got from the movie Poetic Justice, which really dealt with a lot of the hurts that black women and black men were dealing with. And I have to say, some people pan this movie, but I have to say John Singleton did present a balanced picture of black relationships and the rift between black men and black women. And again, I just wondered, again, is it that really that bad out here as related to black love? That's the critical question I have to ask. I mean, are things this bad as related to the relationships between black men and black women that people are just so angry at each other? I mean, when I look into a lot of social media, that's all I see on one side of it is all of this anger and vitriol. And it just really shows that some people, they don't have no love for a black woman or a black man. And I have to sometimes wonder, what makes people this angry? I mean, I understand that people go through a lot of hurt, but do they ever make any efforts to try to heal? That's something I'm asking these days, because when I look at the picture of Poetic Justice again, it really reminds me of what happened with YouTube and many of those who were engaged in the gender war. how they're so caught up in their feelings as related to the hurt that they have that they can't see how they're hurting themselves, because many of these guys and girls out here who go on social media, they go into these back and forths and they're just throwing shots at each other, and their relationships are never successful because they just won't let go of any of that emotional baggage connected to that emotional trauma. And because they won't let go of that emotional baggage as related to that emotional trauma, they can never go and have that relationship with that good man or that good woman, because they're having all of these bad issues from their childhood due to their the way their mother raised them, due to the trauma that many have as related to the abuse some girls suffered at the hands of toxic males. And this is before even Pookie and Ray Ray get involved with them. This is like the uncles who sexually abused them, the other men that the woman has in the home. I mean, these are things that people don't want to talk about, but they'll sit there and attack black men and black women as a collective instead of trying to deal with the issues that are creating these walls between black men and black women. I believe that we really do need to start talking about these issues that are keeping black men and black women from loving each other, because there's a big problem with a small group of people, and they're making it look like this is the way black people are. Now, I know that there's still black on black love everywhere, but you wouldn't know it because the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it. No, what they want to do is divide black men and black women, and they would use things like movies like a Poetic Justice or a movie like a Color Purple to make it look like black men and black women just hate each other. And they would also reinforce this with propaganda like the Oprah Winfrey Show. So when I look at the picture, again, it's a really dark picture, and it's a picture we really need to start thinking about as related to our whole image as black people. We really need to start thinking about this, because we're not showing love for each other in a lot of media, and that's really impacting our kids, just like it did almost 50 years ago when mothers who were bitter over their black men not meeting their work standards, going out and saying that no good black man. What we're doing is teaching this as a culture as related to, oh, this black man is no good, this black woman is no good, when we really need to start taking a look at ourselves and start taking a look at how we're presenting ourselves. Because when I look at that picture that was presented in Poetic Justice, I have to say it's one of the darkest pictures I've seen. I mean, even in many of the stories I write that are romances, I have never gotten that dark. I mean, when I wrote A Recipe for Success, I mean, I presented an image of black love in that story where, yes, black people had issues, but they never were that hateful or that spiteful. In my book, Spinsterella, I never presented that image of black love as black men and black women being that adversarial. Yes, Matilda and the Quiet Man had some issues when they first started, but there was always a way that they saw love in another person. They saw the good in another person. But when I look at Poetic Justice, again, it just presented such a dark picture of black love that it troubled me as I was watching this movie, because I didn't see black people who could love each other. No, I saw black people with a lot of issues, a lot of anger, and a lot of things that needed to be worked out in psychotherapy. And I saw a picture of black people who really they didn't know how to love themselves, so it was hard for them to be able to love another person. And as they had all of this baggage they were dealing with, it made it next to impossible to come together. I mean, a lot of relationships I'm seeing, they remind me of the Tony Terry and the Regina King characters who fell apart because he was a simp trying to go out here and try to buy a woman, and the Regina King character who was basically using men. And again, that wasn't a healthy relationship at all for people to see. Neither was the Tupac and Janet Jackson relationship. I mean, both of them basically, they were trying to come together, but they just needed to work on their issues. And again, that's something people don't want to talk about as related to black on black relationships. Instead, what we have are people trying to push each other away and trying to go and get out here and get with other people, and not understanding you need to work on your issues, because it's your issues that keep you from cutting closer to another person. Now, when I was looking at this movie, it just painted such a dark picture of black love, and it just really was one of the most troubling pictures for me, because I think about black love. And again, when I write stories about black love, black on black love, I show people, yes, they have issues and problems, but there's still a genuine love of self, a genuine love of other people, and they're able to come past their issues. And like in Spinsterella, they were both able to face their fears, and in Recipe for Success, they were able to overcome the issues that they both had. And that's what I thought black people would see in a love story. But when I looked at Poetic Justice, again, it just made me really wonder, are things really that bad between black men and black women? Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, and my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up my stories that feature black on black love, like A Recipe for Success, Spinsterella, The Temptation of John Haynes, and Easting the Sands of Time, you can find all 4 of those black on black romances on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback